It began quietly, almost too quietly for anyone to notice. The galaxy was already ancient, filled with civilizations that had risen and fallen long before Earth was even known. To them, discovering a new world was nothing special. But when a Council exploration ship detected radio waves from a small blue planet at the edge of the Milky Way, curiosity pulled them closer. They expected to find another primitive race, one still learning to walk among the stars. What they found instead was humanity. At first, the aliens were confused. The signals coming from Earth were chaotic. Music, laughter, languages they couldn't decode, and scenes of war all mixed together. To them, it was madness. No other species they had ever met broadcasted so much emotion into space. It was as if Earth was shouting its soul to the stars. The Council called it a world of noise. But one curious researcher argued that this noise meant something deeper. This species, they said, feels too much. When the first alien ship entered Earth's orbit, humanity had already built its own satellites and telescopes. So when the strange lights appeared in the sky, people noticed. The world's governments reacted with disbelief and excitement. For the first time, humanity wasn't alone. The Council made peaceful contact, sending messages in light and sound. Within months, communication began. Humanity's dream of meeting life beyond Earth had come true. The early days were filled with wonder. The aliens shared knowledge about energy, medicine, and faster-than-light travel. They said humanity could one day join the Galactic Council if they proved themselves ready. To the Council, humans were emotional but intelligent, children of a warlike past who might still grow into something better. They thought they could guide Earth gently, helping it become a peaceful member of the interstellar community. But as the months passed, the Council began to notice something unsettling. Humans learned fast, too fast. The technology that other species took centuries to master, humans adapted in years. They questioned every rule, every limit, every safe boundary that the Council tried to set. They weren't content just to copy. They wanted to improve. The Council had seen this behavior before in other young civilizations. But humanity's pace was different. It wasn't curiosity. It was hunger. When asked why they pushed so hard, the humans always had the same answer. Because we have to. The aliens didn't understand what that meant. They didn't know about the long history behind those words, the wars, the disasters, the struggles that shaped humanity's spirit. On Earth, survival had never been guaranteed. Every generation had to fight for peace, for progress, for existence itself. It was a planet that tested its children until they either broke or adapted. That instinct, buried deep in their nature, had followed them into the stars. To the Council, humans appeared friendly and emotional, even fragile at times. They laughed easily, argued loudly, and dreamed endlessly. But when something threatened them, that warmth vanished. They could turn cold and determined in an instant. A Council observer once said, "They love as fiercely as they fight." At first, the Council laughed at that statement, but later, it would echo through the galaxy as a warning. In those early years, the Council envoys visited Earth often. They marveled at its oceans, its forests, its cities full of lights and life. They tried to understand what drove this strange species that cried over art and destroyed each other in wars. Humans treated the aliens with hospitality, curiosity, and sometimes even awe. But there were also those on Earth who didn't trust them. No one gives something for free, they said. Even in the stars, there's a price. That suspicion wasn't entirely wrong. The Council didn't see humanity as equals yet. To them, Earth was a new member of the galactic order, one to be studied and guided, not respected. They shared selective knowledge and kept secrets about the true nature of interstellar politics. Behind their smiles, they debated quietly among themselves. Can this species be controlled? What if they turn violent? What if their old instincts rise again? The Council believed their fears were exaggerated. Humanity seemed eager to cooperate. Earth joined interplanetary trade, sent scientists to alien academies, and even allowed alien advisors to observe human development. It looked like a peaceful future was finally taking shape. But deep down, the humans felt something was off. The Council's kindness always came with invisible strings. Every decision had to be approved. Every invention was regulated. Every voice from Earth was guided toward acceptable opinions. It wasn't peace, it was supervision. One small incident began to change everything. A human mining colony on a nearby moon went silent. When rescue ships arrived, they found the site destroyed. The Council claimed it was an accident, a system failure, but the evidence told a different story. Energy readings showed weapon traces, alien in origin. When Earth demanded an explanation, the Council dismissed it as unnecessary tension. That was the first time humanity saw the other side of the Galactic Council, the side that believed power was enough to silence truth. People on Earth grew restless. News spread fast and questions turned into anger. The Council, sensing rebellion, tried to calm things down by offering trade incentives and reassurances. But it was too late. The damage had been done. Humanity had tasted what it meant to be powerless again, and they refused to go back to that feeling. For centuries, humans had fought for freedom, from tyrants, from fear, from extinction itself. Now they were ready to fight again if they had to. Still, for a while, they tried to believe in peace. Human diplomats traveled across the stars, pleading for answers, asking for transparency. But behind closed doors, Council officials mocked them. To many alien leaders, humans were still the emotional species, driven by pride and passion instead of logic. They thought humanity would eventually submit as other young races had. They didn't realize that humans didn't know how to surrender. Among themselves, the Council members began whispering that maybe inviting Earth was a mistake. Humanity's rapid growth threatened the balance of the galaxy. Other species were beginning to admire them, their creativity, their stubbornness, their courage. That made the Council uneasy. They had spent ages keeping the galaxy peaceful by controlling ambition, but humanity wasn't made for quiet submission. They were made to rise, and rise they did. Within a few decades, humans built their first interstellar fleets, not warships but exploration vessels, sturdy and self-sufficient. They charted systems the Council had long ignored, finding resources and allies among lesser-known races. Where the Council brought rules, humanity brought hope. Where the Council offered structure, humanity offered freedom. Slowly, the galaxy began to change, but deep in the shadows, resentment brewed. Some Council members saw humanity's growing influence as dangerous. They whispered about containment, about teaching Earth its place. They thought humans could still be controlled through politics and pressure. What they didn't understand was that every time they tried to limit humanity, it only pushed them further. It was like trying to chain a storm. And then came the day that would change everything. The day the spark of war was lit. For now, though, the galaxy still saw Earth as the new voice among the stars. Young, curious, unpredictable. No one truly understood what kind of force they were dealing with. To most, humans were simply another species trying to find their place in the cosmic order. But to a few who looked closer, who saw the fire burning behind their eyes, it was clear. If the stars ever turned against them, humanity would not beg for mercy. They would remember, they would fight. And that quiet realization was the beginning of fear, not for Earth but for everyone else. Because in that moment, the galaxy had discovered something it could never unlearn. This small blue planet didn't just survive through kindness or luck. It survived because it was built for it. Every struggle, every loss, every triumph had shaped its people into something no one could tame. The Council came to Earth thinking they had found a new world to guide. What they had truly found was a storm waiting to awaken, and when it finally did, the entire galaxy would feel its power. The years after first contact had changed Earth forever. Humanity had stepped into the stars, guided by the Galactic Council, and for a time, peace seemed real. Trade routes opened between worlds. Human engineers worked alongside alien scientists. People saw new skies, new species, and possibilities that once existed only in dreams. It was a time of hope. But hope has a strange way of fading when too much control hides behind it. As humanity expanded beyond its home world, it became clear that not everything in the galaxy was as peaceful as the Council claimed. The more humans explored, the more rules they found. Every invention had to be approved. Every colony had to be registered. Every movement, every word had to fit within the Council's idea of order. It was said to protect stability, but to humans it felt like chains. Still, people tried to trust the system. They had seen what war did. No one wanted to repeat the mistakes of the past. They built colonies carefully, respected alien laws, and avoided conflict. But not everyone in the galaxy welcomed them with open arms. There were species that still saw humans as outsiders, too emotional, too unpredictable, too dangerous. One of humanity's first colonies was on a quiet, resource-rich planet near the border of Council space. It was meant to be a symbol of cooperation. a place where humans and aliens could live side by side. For a while it worked. Trade flourished, cultures mixed, and people believed that maybe, just maybe, they had found real peace. Then one night, without warning, the colony went silent. No distress calls, no signals, just silence. At first, Earth thought it was a technical issue. They sent a small ship to check. What they found changed everything. The colony was gone. Buildings destroyed, systems offline, life support collapsed. There were no signs of survivors. What shocked investigators most were the traces of advanced energy weapons, technology that only a few council races possessed. When Earth brought the evidence to the council, the reaction was calm, almost rehearsed. They said it was an unfortunate accident. They promised an investigation that never began. Days turned into weeks, and still no answers came. On Earth, frustration turned into grief. Grief turned into anger, and that anger united people like nothing else ever had. For the first time, the world's nations spoke with one voice. They demanded truth. They demanded justice. But the council responded with silence. Human representatives traveled across the stars, requesting meetings, pleading for cooperation. Each time they were told to be patient. Each time they returned home with nothing. The council treated them like children, emotional, naive, not yet ready to understand how the galaxy truly worked. But humanity understood more than the council realized. They saw the patterns, the delays, the false kindness, and they began to see the truth hidden behind the words. The council didn't want peace, they wanted control. They had seen what humans were capable of, and they were afraid. So they lied, hoping time would make the memory of the colony fade away. But humanity doesn't forget its dead. On Earth, scientists, soldiers, and engineers began working in secret. Governments that had once been rivals shared knowledge and resources. For the first time in history, humanity was united not by fear but by purpose. They weren't planning for revenge. They were preparing for survival. Because if the galaxy could destroy one colony without consequence, what would stop them from destroying Earth next? The council noticed the change. Human fleets grew stronger. New technologies appeared. Designs the council had never approved. The humans were no longer following the rules. They were building faster ships, stronger defenses, and weapons meant not for conquest, but for protection. When questioned, human diplomats smiled politely and said, "We just want to make sure our people are safe." But behind those smiles, something powerful was growing. A quiet determination that could not be undone. Rumors began to spread across the galaxy. Some alien traders spoke of human ships patrolling deep space far from council control. Others whispered that the humans were developing their own network of allies, small species tired of being ignored by the council. It was said that humans shared their technology freely, teaching others how to defend themselves. The council called it dangerous. Humans called it fair. Then came the spark that lit the fire. A convoy of human transport ships, carrying families, supplies, and engineers, was attacked near the edge of council territory. It was supposed to be a safe route, protected under interstellar law. But when the distress signals reached Earth, the council once again dismissed it as a pirate incident. They offered condolences but no action. This time, Earth didn't believe them. Evidence surfaced that the attack had been carried out with precision and coordination impossible for ordinary raiders. Someone had wanted those ships gone. Someone powerful. And when the council refused to hand over data from their sensors, humanity stopped asking for answers. They decided to find the truth on their own. A secret operation began, small, quiet, and dangerous. Human scouts crossed deep space, tracing the signal trails and communication patterns the council tried to hide. What they found left no doubt. The attack had come from one of the council's own member worlds, a powerful species with strong influence in the inner circle. When Earth revealed this to the council chambers, chaos erupted. Accusations, denials, confusion, all of it filled the great hall. The humans stood calmly, waiting for justice, but once again the council voted to avoid conflict and maintain stability. The guilty world faced no punishment. Instead, Earth was told to move on. That was the moment everything changed. Something inside humanity broke. They had done everything the right way, followed rules, trusted promises, respected authority, and still they were treated as if their lives didn't matter. For the first time since joining the galactic community, humans realized they were alone again, so they decided to stop waiting for help. Earth withdrew from several council programs. Human representatives stopped attending meetings. The trade routes were closed. When the council sent envoys to negotiate, they were met with silence. It wasn't rage they faced, it was resolve. Humanity was preparing for something far greater than diplomacy. Behind the scenes, engineers worked day and night. Massive shipyards appeared in orbit around the Moon and Mars. New alliances were formed with species who had suffered under council arrogance. The galaxy didn't notice at first. No one believed humans could rise that fast. But within a few short years, the first fleet stood ready. And yet even then, humanity didn't strike. They waited, patient and silent, hoping the council would see reason. But the galaxy didn't understand patience the way humans did. To them, silence was weakness. So the council decided to send a message. They issued a decree restricting human expansion. No new colonies, no independent fleets, no new technology without permission. They called it a temporary measure to ensure peace. To humanity, it was the final insult. The message reached Earth's leadership late one evening. Every channel fell silent. The stars themselves seemed to wait. Then, with calm voices and steady hearts, humanity gave their answer. They would no longer be ruled. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a declaration of independence. Humanity didn't ask for permission. They simply acted. Every ship returned home. Every scientist left council stations. Every trade route closed. Earth turned inward, united, focused. Across the galaxy, fear began to spread. The council couldn't understand how this small, emotional species had the courage to defy them. They thought humans were reckless, but they were wrong. Humans weren't reckless, they were determined. They didn't seek conflict, but they refused to live under anyone's shadow again. And so in quiet meeting rooms and command stations, preparations began. Engineers worked in silence. Pilots trained in secret. The air on Earth felt heavy, charged with something ancient and unstoppable. The same spirit that had carried humanity through every storm in its history. The council didn't realize it yet, but they had just made the greatest mistake in galactic history. They had turned the most resilient species in the universe into something they could never control. The spark had been lit, and soon, the stars would burn brighter than ever before. Because when humanity decides it has nothing left to lose, the entire galaxy will remember what it means when Earth rises together. The silence after Earth's declaration echoed across the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council found itself unsure of what to do. No one had ever defied them before. Every species that joined their system had always obeyed their rules, believing that peace could only exist under the Council's control. But humans were different. They didn't ask for peace, they built it on their own terms. The Council expected chaos to follow. They believed humans would argue among themselves that their unity would break under pressure. But instead, the opposite happened. Humanity became stronger. Borders closed, yes, but within those borders, something powerful began to take shape. Factories that once made simple cargo ships now worked day and night to build massive vessels that could travel faster and farther than any before. Research stations on Mars and Luna turned into command hubs. The world governments, once divided by politics, now stood side by side. Every project, every resource, every person had a single purpose: to make sure no one could ever threaten Earth again. It wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. Humanity had learned that in this galaxy, peace was not given freely. It had to be protected. From orbit, the planet looked peaceful. Blue oceans, white clouds, and cities glowing at night. But below that calm surface, the entire species was preparing for the unknown. There were no speeches about glory, no calls for conquest. Instead, there was quiet determination. Every worker, every scientist, every pilot understood that they were part of something far bigger than themselves. Word of Earth's transformation spread fast. Traders whispered about the strange energy readings near human space. Some said they saw massive ships being tested in secret. Others claimed to have heard the hum of engines that bent light itself. Most aliens dismissed it as rumors, stories meant to make humans seem stronger than they were. But the few who had been close enough knew the truth. Humanity wasn't just rebuilding, it was evolving. The Council tried to regain control through diplomacy, They sent envoys offering new agreements, trade deals, and reassurances. But Earth didn't respond. The Council then tried to use pressure, cutting off access to certain resources and closing their ports to human traders. But again, humanity didn't break. They simply adapted. They began building everything on their own. That frightened the Council more than anything else. The galaxy had never seen such rapid progress. Technologies that took other civilizations centuries to develop appeared in human hands within a few years. Artificial intelligence, advanced propulsion, planetary shields. Humans mastered them all, often improving on the Council's own designs. The Council's scientists couldn't understand how they worked so fast. But the answer was simple. Humans had always thrived under pressure. The harder life became, the faster they learned. And when something broke them, they didn't stay broken. They rebuilt stronger. In those years of isolation, humanity changed. They didn't just advance in technology, they grew wiser. They looked beyond fear and began to see the bigger picture. They realized that the galaxy wasn't united because of peace. It was united because of fear. Fear of the Council, fear of punishment, fear of speaking out. And in that realization, humans saw themselves in those other species, the ones who kept silent, the ones who wished for freedom but never dared to ask for it. That's when the first quiet alliances began to form. A small message from a distant world reached Earth. It was not from a powerful race or a council member, but from a forgotten colony that had long suffered under unfair rules. They had heard of what Earth had done, how humanity stood up for itself, and they wanted help. They didn't ask for weapons or protection. They just wanted hope. Earth replied. They sent aid ships disguised as traders. They shared technology for food production, energy, and medicine. No grand announcements were made, but one by one, small worlds began to turn toward Earth for help. Humanity didn't demand loyalty. They simply offered a better way. For many across the galaxy, that was enough, but the Council noticed, and they didn't like it. They began to call humanity a threat to stability. Propaganda spread through the stars, stories claiming that humans were building armies, planning invasions, and spreading chaos. But the more they tried to paint humanity as dangerous, the more other species began to see through the lies. They saw the truth with their own eyes. Humans weren't destroying worlds, they were rebuilding them. Still, tension was growing. Patrol ships from the Council began to appear near human borders, monitoring activity. They claimed it was for security, but everyone knew it was intimidation. Humanity stayed calm, never firing, never provoking. They knew a single wrong move could start something they weren't yet ready for. But humans have a breaking point. It came one quiet morning when a Council patrol crossed into human space. Officially, it was an accident. Unofficially, it was a test to see if humanity would back down. But when Earth demanded an explanation, the Council simply ignored it. For days, human stations received no answers. The silence was not new, but this time it felt heavier, colder, more deliberate. That was when humanity stopped waiting. They activated their deep space beacons and summoned their fleets, not for attack, but for protection. Ships that had never been seen before emerged from behind moons and gas giants. Their design was unlike anything in the galaxy, simple, strong, and efficient. Each vessel carried the mark of Earth, not as a symbol of power, but as a promise. We are ready. The first time the Council saw these ships, they didn't believe their sensors. The vessels were built with materials unknown to them, combining human engineering with alien innovation. They were not weapons of war. They were shields of survival. But to the Council, they looked like defiance. In the following months, tension spread like wildfire. Every world held its breath, waiting for what would come next. The galaxy had known conflict before, but this felt different. This wasn't a war of conquest, it was a clash of belief. The Council believed in control. Humanity believed in freedom. On Earth, the people were calm. Life continued, though the skies now held more ships than stars. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic calls for battle. Humanity had learned that strength didn't need noise, it just needed purpose. Every family, every worker, every young person growing up under that new dawn understood that the price of peace was readiness. Then came a moment that would define everything. During a diplomatic summit, One of the council leaders declared that human independence was a violation of interstellar law. They demanded that Earth dismantle its fleets and surrender its research stations. They promised that if humanity complied, the council would forgive past misunderstandings. Earth's response was short and simple. Peace cannot exist without respect. We will never kneel again. The message echoed through every communication channel. It wasn't shouted, it was spoken calmly, but it carried a weight the galaxy had never felt before. For the first time, the council realized what they were truly facing. Humanity wasn't an angry child. It wasn't a rogue species. It was something older, deeper, and far more determined. A civilization that had learned through endless struggle that freedom was worth everything. That same day, hundreds of smaller races sent private transmissions of support. They couldn't fight, but they could stand beside Earth in spirit. And for humanity, that was enough. Across the stars, whispers began again. The same whispers that had once called Earth the world of noise. But now the noise sounded different. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was unity. It was purpose. It was the heartbeat of a species that had finally remembered who it was. The council watched, uneasy. Their fleets were larger, their weapons stronger, but for the first time they felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. Because no weapon could defeat a species that refused to give up, humanity didn't start the fight. But when the first sparks began to fall, the galaxy finally began to understand what kind of force it had awakened. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hatred. It was resolve. The quiet, unbreakable will of a world that had faced extinction 1,000 times and always found a way to survive. The council had wanted obedience. Instead, they had taught humanity how to unite, and now, as fleets assembled in the cold silence of space, every world in the galaxy could feel the truth settle like a storm on the horizon. Humanity wasn't coming for conquest. They were coming for justice, and the galaxy was about to learn what it truly meant when Earth decided to rise. The stars had grown silent. Every species across the galaxy was watching, waiting, unsure of what would happen next. Humanity's fleets now filled the dark stretches of space, calm, quiet, and unreadable. They didn't advance, didn't attack, didn't provoke. They just waited. And somehow that silence was more terrifying than any weapon the galaxy had ever seen. The Galactic Council met almost every day, arguing behind closed doors. Some leaders wanted to strike first, to crush Earth before it became unstoppable. Others urged caution, warning that provoking humans might ignite something they couldn't control. But no one could agree on what to do. The longer they hesitated, the stronger humanity became. On Earth, life had changed completely. The skies shimmered with the trails of starships rising and landing. Every city worked in harmony with the others. There were no rival nations anymore. No borders, no divisions. The old world that once fought over land and pride was gone. Humanity had learned that survival in the galaxy required something greater than competition. It required unity. Factories ran day and night, powered by clean energy and determination. Young minds designed machines that could repair themselves in space. Engineers built engines that moved faster than light, silent and smooth like flowing water. Farmers grew food not only for Earth but for colonies across the stars. The world had become a heartbeat, steady and strong, pulsing with purpose. And at the center of it all were the great shipyards, the shining backbone of human progress. They stretched across the void, orbiting the moon, Mars, and the outer planets. Massive structures floated silently, surrounded by thousands of smaller vessels working like living organisms. From those shipyards came something the galaxy had never seen before. Vessels of impossible size and beauty, each built not for conquest but for endurance. The first of these was called Oblivion. It was not named in pride but in memory. It carried the names of every lost colony, every ship destroyed, every life taken by silence. Its hull shimmered with dark silver metal, smooth and reflective like water. It could cross entire systems without needing to stop. Powered by technology born from both human genius and alien knowledge, refined, improved, perfected, when the Oblivion first left orbit, people on Earth stood in silence, watching it rise. It wasn't just a ship, it was a promise that no one would ever erase humanity again. Soon others followed. Eclipse, Vigil, Unity, Genesis, each one more advanced than the last. Every name told a story. Every story reminded the galaxy that Earth had not forgotten its pain. The ships were not built to destroy. They were built to protect, to make sure the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. The Council, however, saw them differently. To them, these were not ships of peace. They were warnings, silent, gleaming warnings that humanity had outgrown control. Panic spread through the halls of power. If they can build this, one council member said, then they can destroy us all. Fear clouded reason. And fear, as always, led to mistakes. One night, without official approval, a small council fleet entered human space, claiming it was a security inspection. They approached a colony near the border, demanding access to its stations. The humans refused. The fleet retreated, but the message was clear. The Council didn't trust Earth anymore. Earth responded with calm restraint. No threats, no aggression, only a message sent to every corner of the galaxy. Humanity seeks peace, but peace does not mean submission. That message changed everything. For the first time, smaller civilizations began to speak out. Worlds that had been silent for generations raised their voices, asking the same question. If humanity could stand on its own, why couldn't they? The Council had ruled for centuries through control and fear. Now that control was slipping. Earth never asked them to fight. But by simply existing as free, humanity had inspired others to imagine freedom too. And that frightened the Council more than any weapon ever could. Days turned into months. The galaxy stood at the edge of something inevitable. The Council gathered its fleets, claiming it was for defense. Humanity responded by spreading its ships across the stars, not in attack, but to protect trade routes and colonies that trusted them. Both sides said they wanted peace, but the distance between them grew wider each day. And then came the turning point, the moment the galaxy would never forget. A Council outpost near the border suddenly went silent. Reports claimed it had been attacked, though no proof existed. Without waiting for investigation, certain Council members accused Earth, calling it an act of war. Panic spread through their worlds, and fleets were ordered to advance. For a long, tense week, the galaxy held its breath. Everyone expected the humans to retaliate, to strike back with the full force of their new armada. But instead, Earth did something no one predicted. They opened communication channels and broadcast a message to all. It was a simple recording from an unknown colony, the very one that had gone silent. The transmission showed damage not caused by humans, but by the Council's own forces. The attack had been an internal cover-up, meant to blame Earth and justify action. The truth hit the galaxy like a storm. Suddenly, everything changed. Worlds that once sided with the Council began to question their leaders. Protests broke out across planets that had long been silent. People demanded transparency. They demanded truth. And once again, humanity's calm, measured voice echoed across the stars. We do not seek control. We seek honesty. That single sentence broke the illusion of the Council's authority. For the first time, the galaxy saw humanity not as a threat, but as a mirror, a reflection of everything they wished to be. Strong, independent, and free. In the months that followed, humanity grew from isolation into leadership. They didn't claim power through conquest, but through example. Their colonies became safe havens for refugees. Their ships carried supplies to worlds struggling under Council sanctions. And wherever human aid went, hope followed. Even the Council could no longer deny it. Their old systems of control were falling apart. The galaxy was changing and humanity stood at its heart, but peace was still fragile. Some among the Council refused to accept this new reality. They saw humanity's rise as humiliation. They were meant to be guided, one leader said bitterly, not worshipped. Those words, spoken in anger, would later be remembered as the moment the old order finally collapsed, because that bitterness turned into something dangerous. Fear mixed with pride. And fear mixed with pride has always been the spark for something worse. Yet Earth remained patient. They didn't rush to claim victory. Instead, they focused on rebuilding, on healing. They extended hands even to those who once opposed them. We all share the same stars, one human diplomat said softly. We can either guard them together or lose them together. And that message began to spread. Slowly, planets that once saw humans as enemies began to see them as allies. Races that had never spoken before started to cooperate. Trade flourished again. The galaxy wasn't healed yet, but for the first time in centuries it felt like it could be. Still, deep down, everyone knew that peace built on fear couldn't last forever. The Council's pride wouldn't allow it. There were still those in power who couldn't stand the idea that humans, a once primitive species, had risen above them. They whispered plans, made secret deals, plotted in the shadows. They didn't realize that humanity had learned to see through silence long ago. As the year ended, the great human fleet stood watch, not in arrogance but in readiness. Each ship, from the smallest explorer to the largest dreadnought, carried not just weapons but lessons of unity, loss, and resilience. The galaxy had mocked humans once. Now it watched them with awe and quiet respect. And as the stars shimmered beyond the darkness, one truth became clear to all. Humanity's power didn't come from their machines or their ships. It came from something far deeper, their heart. Their ability to rise again no matter how many times they were pushed down. The Council had wanted to teach Earth its place. Instead, Earth had reminded the galaxy what courage looked like. The turning point had come not through battle but through truth. And from that truth a new era had begun. An era where the sound of human determination echoed across every world, whispering the same message that started it all. Peace must be earned through respect. And as the galaxy finally began to understand that, a quiet fear settled in every corner of space, because everyone knew, if that respect was ever broken again, humanity would rise once more, and this time no force in existence could stop them. Time had passed, and the galaxy had begun to change in ways no one had imagined. The Council, once unchallenged, was no longer the center of power. Their decisions, once absolute, were now questioned by every world they had ever ruled. They tried to maintain control, but the weight of their own arrogance pressed down harder than any enemy could. Humanity, on the other hand, had grown stronger without even trying to fight. Their fleets remained not as instruments of war but as symbols of protection. Every ship that left Earth carried supplies, medical equipment, engineers, and knowledge. Where there had once been fear, now there was hope. Where there had been doubt, now there was trust. Small worlds that had never dared to speak now reached out to Earth for help. They asked for guidance, technology, or even just counsel. Humanity responded quietly, never demanding loyalty, never insisting on tribute. They treated these worlds as equals, sharing what they had learned, helping them survive, helping them grow. The galaxy began to realize that Earth's strength was not in its ships or machines, but in its spirit. Even some council members began to see the truth. They could no longer dismiss humans as emotional, impulsive creatures. The calm determination, the endless patience, the ability to unite even in the face of threats. These were qualities they had never expected to find in a primitive species. Slowly, grudging respect began to replace fear, and in some corners, admiration. Yet not all were willing to accept this new order. There were factions within the Council who still clung to the old ways, insisting that humanity must be controlled or contained. They whispered of strategies, of secret fleets, of plans to regain dominance. But these plans were slow, measured, and cautious. They underestimated something that humans had learned long ago. True power does not need to threaten to exist. It grows quietly, steadily, and without permission. Meanwhile, humanity continued to move forward. Colonies once isolated were now thriving centers of learning and innovation. People lived without fear, worked without restraint, and dreamed bigger than they had ever dreamed before. Scientists developed new energy systems that could power entire planets. Engineers built ships that could travel farther than anyone thought possible. Even artists and writers contributed, creating works that were shared across worlds, connecting humans and other species in ways the Council had never imagined. Through it all, humanity never forgot its beginnings. They remembered the colony that had been lost, the ships that had been destroyed, the voices that had been silenced. They built memorials on every planet they settled, simple reminders that peace, freedom, and survival were never guaranteed, and that they must always be protected. These memorials became symbols for everyone in the galaxy, not of fear but of hope. As humans continued to expand, the balance of power shifted. Worlds that had once relied on the Council for protection began to rely on Earth. They didn't need armies or weapons. They needed guidance, wisdom, and stability. Humanity provided that without demanding anything in return, and with every act of kindness, the reputation of humans grew. They were no longer seen as just survivors. They were seen as leaders, The council watched this quietly, powerless to stop it. Their authority had always been based on fear, and humans had shown the galaxy that fear was no longer the only way to unite civilizations. Every plan the council tried to make failed, because humanity didn't play by the old rules. They didn't try to overthrow or destroy. They simply acted with purpose, and the galaxy responded. Even some of the council's strongest factions began to acknowledge the truth. Humanity was not only resilient, they were unstoppable when united. And more importantly, they were fair. That fairness created loyalty, trust, and stability far more effectively than threats ever could. And yet, humanity did not become arrogant. They did not claim titles, demand power, or seek revenge for the past. They simply offered a new path, one where justice, cooperation, and understanding could exist alongside strength. The galaxy slowly adapted to this new reality. Old conflicts softened. Wars that had dragged on for decades were resolved not through force but through negotiation, with human mediators often at the center. One of the most remarkable aspects of this change was how humans treated even those who had once opposed them. Planets that had supported attacks against human colonies were now invited to trade, to share knowledge, and to collaborate on projects that benefited everyone. Humans didn't humiliate them. They didn't demand penance. They offered opportunities, proving to the galaxy that true power does not come from punishment. It comes from trust. Stories of humanity's actions spread far and wide. Children across distant worlds learned about the lost colonies, the fleets that had been built in secret, and the patience and unity that had allowed humans to rise. Historians began to write new accounts of the galaxy, centering not on fear or conquest but on cooperation, resilience, and the strength of a united species. Even the most skeptical council members could not deny the impact humanity had made. Humanity had changed the galaxy without firing a single weapon in anger. Every action, every decision, every alliance was deliberate and careful. They had created stability not by force but by example, and the galaxy slowly began to follow. Yet there was a quiet understanding among humans themselves. They knew that respect and trust could be fragile. They remembered the council's arrogance, the lost colonies, the years of silence. They knew that even as they offered peace, they must remain prepared for the unexpected. That vigilance was not fear. It was wisdom born from centuries of survival. And so humanity continued to build, to explore, to guide. They didn't impose their will on anyone. They simply stood ready, prepared to protect those who could not protect themselves, and to defend freedom wherever it might be threatened. As this new order solidified, the galaxy began to shift its view of humans entirely. They were no longer seen as just survivors or outsiders. They were leaders, not tyrants, not conquerors, but leaders who had proven that strength and compassion could coexist. That determination and patience could achieve far more than violence ever could. For the council, this was both humbling and frightening. They had long believed that control was the only way to maintain order. Now they understood that humanity had shown the galaxy a different way, a way that could not be erased, a way that had reshaped power itself. Humanity's rise had not gone unnoticed by every species. Some species, previously unknown or isolated, began to seek human guidance for their own development. Entire systems began to thrive under the gentle but firm influence of Earth. What was once fear now became admiration. What was once suspicion became trust. And throughout it all, humanity never forgot its origins. The memory of hardship, loss, and struggle remained central to their identity. They knew that their power was not meant to dominate, but to protect. They knew that true leadership comes not from fear, but from responsibility, and they carried that understanding across every star, every colony, and every world they touched. By the time the Council's old order fully collapsed, humanity had already built a new system of cooperation, respect, and mutual aid. They didn't take power, they earned it. And the galaxy, slowly but surely, began to follow. The era that followed was remembered not as a war or a victory or a conquest, but as a transformation. Humanity had shown the galaxy that courage, unity, and compassion could change everything. That even in a universe filled with fear, hope could rise. That even in the cold darkness of space, a species could shine as a light for all others to follow. In every story told, every lesson shared, every star lit in human space, one truth became clear. Humanity had become more than a survivor. Humanity had become a symbol a symbol of strength tempered with wisdom, power guided by fairness, and freedom protected by determination. And the galaxy would never forget it. The galaxy had changed. What was once a place of fear, control, and silence was now alive with the quiet hum of life, innovation, and hope. Humanity had grown from a small, struggling planet into a presence that shaped entire star systems. Their rise had been unexpected, even to themselves. It hadn't been about conquest or revenge. It had been about survival, understanding, and the unwavering determination to protect what was theirs. Even the Galactic Council, the old rulers of the stars, had learned that power without respect was fragile. Their fleets no longer inspired fear. Their decrees no longer commanded obedience. The galaxy had witnessed something far more powerful. A species that had endured unimaginable hardships, faced betrayal, and yet never lost its humanity. Humans had rebuilt not just their own world, but the worlds around them. They shared technology that allowed colonies to thrive independently, taught medicine that saved thousands of lives, and developed energy systems that transformed barren planets into thriving ecosystems. They didn't dominate. They uplifted. They didn't demand loyalty. They earned it. The fleets that had once only filled the skies of Earth now patrolled far corners of the galaxy, not as a threat, but as guardians. Each ship, from the smallest scout to the largest dreadnought, carried supplies, knowledge, and engineers. The people of the galaxy came to understand that these ships were not weapons of war. They were vessels of promise. Even the smallest worlds previously overlooked began to flourish under the guidance of humanity. Children learned not just from their local teachers, but from educators sent from Earth. They learned mathematics, science, and history, but also the lessons humanity had learned through struggle, patience, courage, and the value of cooperation. The old ways of the Council could no longer dictate life across the stars. Their control had been replaced with something stronger: trust. The galaxy no longer followed out of fear. It followed because it believed in humanity's example. Humans had shown that it was possible to be strong without being cruel, to protect without oppressing, and to grow without destroying. On Earth, people reflected on the journey that had brought them here. They remembered the lost colonies, the destroyed ships, the lives taken by silence. Those memories had never been forgotten. They had shaped humanity's character, teaching the species that every choice mattered, every life had value, and every act of courage could change the course of history. And now, humanity looked forward. They did not seek to rule. They did not seek to conquer. They sought only to ensure that no species would ever be silenced or controlled in the same way humanity had been. Every colony, every alliance, every treaty was built on equality and respect. Every action was deliberate, measured, and thoughtful. Humanity had learned that true strength was not in domination, but in the ability to inspire others to rise. The galaxy watched in awe as humans spread this philosophy across the stars. Where once there had been fear and suspicion, now there was dialogue and understanding. Planets that had never communicated with each other before began to share ideas, resources, and culture. Art, music, and literature traveled between worlds, creating connections that had seemed impossible. Humanity had shown that unity could exist without control, and that cooperation could achieve more than conflict ever had. Even those who had once opposed humanity began to change. Some former council leaders, recognizing the irreversible shift, approached Earth not as enemies but as partners. They sought guidance, not dominance. Humanity responded with the same patience that had carried them through centuries of struggle. They didn't humiliate or punish. They offered understanding, teaching the galaxy that leadership was not about power, but about responsibility. Throughout it all, humans never lost sight of what made them unique. They remained curious, emotional, and inventive. They laughed, argued, and dreamed. They celebrated successes and mourned losses. They continued to explore, to invent, to challenge themselves. And in doing so, they inspired countless other species to do the same. The galaxy had not simply accepted humanity's rise, it had begun to reflect it. And still, there were challenges. Not every species could immediately change. Some struggled with the idea of equality and cooperation. Others resisted, clinging to old fears and habits. But humanity had learned the value of patience. They worked quietly, persistently, never forcing others, always demonstrating the possibilities that existed when one acted with purpose and integrity. Over time, a new order emerged across the stars. It was not dictated by a single council or a single species. It was built on shared values, collaboration, and trust. Humans did not impose this order. They had only shown it could exist. The galaxy, inspired by example, embraced it willingly. The fleets of humanity, once symbols of defiance, became symbols of security and stability. Their colonies were safe havens. Their research stations became centers of innovation. Their ships carried knowledge and aid wherever it was needed. And everywhere humans went, they carried a message, simple but profound. Freedom and cooperation were worth fighting for, but they were more powerful when defended with wisdom rather than force. And through it all, Earth remained the heart of this new era. It was not because humans demanded it, but because every species, knowingly or not, looked to Earth as an example. Humanity had earned this position through perseverance, resilience, and compassion. The galaxy no longer feared Earth, it respected it. The Council, once feared and absolute, had become a shadow of its former self. Its fleets were reduced, its decrees ignored, its influence diminished. And yet, there was no bitterness from humanity. They did not gloat, did not punish, did not seek revenge. They simply continued to guide, to protect, and to inspire. The galaxy had learned that leadership did not need cruelty. It could be achieved through action, example, and unwavering resolve. The transformation was complete. A species that had once been underestimated, dismissed, and ignored had become the central force in the galaxy, not through aggression, but through vision, unity, and resilience. Humanity had shown that strength was more than power, that wisdom was more than control, and that survival was more than endurance. Across distant stars, humans and other species alike began to celebrate a new era. The memory of past struggles remained, but it was no longer a burden. It was a foundation. Every lost colony, every sacrificed life, every silent hardship had contributed to the birth of a galaxy that could now thrive on cooperation and respect. And on Earth, people looked up at the night sky, the same sky that had once seemed so vast, so lonely, and so full of threats. Now it was full of life, connection, and possibility. Humanity had not only survived, it had risen to become a beacon for the stars. The galaxy had feared them once. It had doubted them. It had tried to control them. But in the end, humanity had done something far greater than proving power. They had proven the value of resilience, of unity, and of hope. They had shown that a species could rise not through destruction, but through determination, compassion, and the refusal to surrender to fear. And as the stars stretched endlessly into the distance, one truth remained clear. Humanity's legacy would not be forgotten. The lessons they had learned, the courage they had shown, and the spirit that had carried them through every trial would shine across the galaxy for generations to come. For in a universe that had once underestimated them, humanity had become unstoppable, not because they sought dominance, but because they had remembered who they truly were. A species built for survival, for endurance, for hope. A species that had faced the galaxy's greatest challenges and emerged not only alive, but as a light for all others to follow. And with that, the stars themselves seemed to acknowledge it. Quietly, endlessly, and without question, humanity had become the heart of the galaxy. The galaxy would never be the same again.